For a while, it looked like Georgia Tech might be in the college football playoff last season. Can the Yellow Jackets replicate what was an unbelievable season this year in what is going to be a very competitive ACC? You are listening to the You Think You Know Sports podcast. I have done podcasts on half of the ACC teams, or about half. We're going in ABC order, and we're at Georgia Tech today. We're going to talk about the Yellow Jackets. You can get more information on youthinkyouKnowSports.com, a huge blog of information on the Yellow Jackets, as well as on my TikTok page where we have 10,000 followers, You Think You Know Sports. Look, I think there's a lot of questions here for Georgia Tech, but at the same time, there maybe aren't as many questions as you think, so I'll explain. First off, Brent Key has proven that he is a good coach, right? He's 27-20 in 3 years, plus the interim time he had in 2022 at Georgia Tech. They've had a winning record all three of his full seasons, including 1 year where they won a bowl game to get there. 9-4 last season. They got as high as number 7 in the AP poll. This is a Georgia Tech program that had not won nine games since 2016, when they also went 9-4, but won a bowl game to get there. They did not have to win a bowl game to get to 9 wins during this season. The last time they had done that was 2014, when under Paul Johnson they'd won 11 games. So the question is, can they keep this rolling? Can they keep it going? Enter Alberto Mendoza. And if you're a casual college football fan, meaning you're not someone who follows recruiting or pays that close of attention to players, you just kind of know the teams in general, then you've heard that Mendoza name because you know Fernando Mendoza just led Indiana to the national championship game. He won the Heisman Trophy, and he was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft to the Raiders. Well, this is his brother, who was his backup at Indiana. He was 19 of 25 passing last year, 292 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a pick. He also ran it pretty well, 187 yards and 15 carries to get those 187 yards and a rushing touchdown. So Mendoza played in 9 games this past season behind his brother. Look, Indiana blew out a lot of teams. So Alberto Mendoza got out there. Indiana was bringing in Josh Hoover at quarterback, the transfer from TCU. Alberto Mendoza chose to transfer. And now he's with Brent Key at Georgia Tech and is likely going to be the starting quarterback, something that Key has kind of talked about a little bit in press conferences, although I don't think at this point it has been official. Still got to earn it as we get into the fall. One interesting thing, and again, we're talking about mop-up duty here, but Mendoza had 5 straight games last year where he had appearances and did not throw an incompletion. He was the number 55 quarterback, according to ESPN, out of high school. He's a 3-star prospect. His offensive coordinator is going to be different than what we saw with Haynes King last year. So to back up for just a second, Haynes King has kind of been the heart and soul of this Georgia Tech offense the last couple years. When they needed a big play, they could rely on his legs. He did enough through the air with his arm. But then you had Aaron Philo behind him, who played a game or two when Haynes King was out. Philo has gone with Buster Faulkner, his former offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech, to Florida, where Florida is now coached by John Summerall. New coaching staff there. So King and Philo are both gone. So this Georgia Tech offense with Mendoza is going to look different. And I do think that is going to be the key to the season. I mean, listen, you could say that about a myriad number of teams here. If you had a quarterback change, that's going to be huge, right? But I do think it's really big for Georgia Tech, considering how much they relied on Haynes King and how important he was to what they accomplished the last couple of years. What we do know, though, is that Justice Haynes is going to be a big part of this. He is the former Alabama and Michigan player who has transferred now to Georgia Tech. He had over 100 yards in 6 of 7 games last year, and he averaged 17 carries a game when he was healthy. So, look, this is a guy that can be your bell cow if you need him to be. And what's scary is I don't think Georgia Tech needs him to be, because they also have Malachi Hosley back at running back, who had a good year running the ball for the Yellow Jackets as well. Hosley had 697 yards rushing on 98 carries. So he's not going to be the guy that you're giving the ball to 20 times a game, where I think that Justice Haynes could be. But he is going to be a guy who can come in and spell the starter Or maybe even, listen, maybe he gets more carries this year as they turn into a two-headed monster. We'll see. Look, they only have 7 starters back. 2 of them are on the offensive line. Malachi Carney, Ethan McKinney are both back as offensive linemen. Both of them were honorable mention all ACC and are going to need to be, all ACC type players again as Georgia Tech rebuilds this offense. You might remember that Keelan Rutledge was taken toward the end of the first round of the NFL draft by the Houston Texans. Rutledge is a mauler. He's gone, man. That dude would open up lanes in the running game. I mean, go look at his video. Pretty insane if you go back and watch some of the draft video there. So Carney and McKinney are going to have to fill that hole on the offensive line. Defensively, they have 5 guys back. Kyle Edford, the linebacker, had 77 tackles last year. He was also an all-ACC honorable mention. They have Amontre Bradford back at linebacker and E.J. Lightsey also back at linebacker. Zachary Tobe is a defensive back returning, and A.J. Hoffler is back on the defensive line. So it's going to be important for Georgia Tech to be able to compete defensively because at times last year they weren't good enough on that side of the ball. Opponents averaged 6 yards per play last year, almost 6 yards per play against Georgia Tech. That's outside the top 100 in all the statistics, which is a horrible number. They allowed over 400 yards a game, and they allowed 26 points per game. They've got to get better there. Listen, they did some things in the transfer portal to try to help. Noah Carter, a linebacker from Alabama, comes over. Not a lot of production at Alabama, but a highly recruited player. The other problem they have is they need receivers, man. I mean, listen, Alberto Mendoza could be Fernando Mendoza, but if they don't find receivers, Georgia Tech's not going to be able to move the football. Now, we know, obviously, Haynes and Hosley are going to be huge at running back, but what are they going to do when they need to throw the football? So the only guy back who caught a pass last year is Jordan Allen. He had 22 catches. But they have brought in some guys who are going to be interesting, all right? They brought in Jalen Mbakwe from Alabama. He's a former 5-star player who has played both wide receiver and defensive back in college. I think he can play both ways. We'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm not saying he's going to be Travis Hunter by any means, but let's see if he gets some snaps on both sides of the football for Georgia Tech. Isaiah Furman from Elon has come in. He is an explosive receiver who can go up and get the ball. Listen, this is a guy you want to know, okay? If you're not going to learn anything else in this video, these were his long catches last year in games. Again, they were probably long ones other long ones in these games, but in different games last year, his long reception was 47, 53, 62, 76, 81, and yes, 96 yards. So you talk about somebody who may be able to take the top off the defense. Now, he was playing at Elon, right? So it's going to be different against ACC defenses. There's no doubt. But that is the kind of player who could come in and could really spark an offense with a deep throw or when they're struggling a little bit, right? Javen Plummer also comes in from California at receiver. So there are some pieces here. We're going to have to see how they all come together and how things work out with Mendoza being the quarterback. The schedule is an interesting one that maybe is not quite as imposing early as it could be. Listen, I think the Colorado game to open the year, September 3rd, that's always a tricky game. Georgia Tech got behind early last year because of all the turnovers very early in that game. They managed to come back with Haynes King and beat Deion Sanders in Colorado. That game's in Atlanta this year. Then they get Tennessee in week 2. And look, Tennessee is a question mark. We haven't gotten to Tennessee in the podcast yet, but they don't know who the quarterback's going to be just yet. There's some thoughts there on who it's going to be. Josh Heupel usually has a high-powered offense regardless of who you put back there. But look, I don't think that that's a game where you're playing a Tennessee team that is a well-oiled machine, and you have 9 days off before that game, right? Depending on what happens against Colorado. They host Mercer in week 3. They go to Stanford on September 26th. That's a long, long trip. There's not a trip to Cal on here. California is not on their schedule. So the long west trip, it only is Stanford. They also don't play at SMU, which is about as far as you could go west. 4 of their first 5 are at home. So they got Colorado at home, Tennessee at home, Mercer at home, and then Duke, the ACC champion, in week 5, right? So a very important stretch for Georgia Tech to begin the year. Look, again, I think it could be worse. You're not playing these games on the road other than Stanford. So you have an SEC team. You have a Big 12 team in Colorado. And you've got the ACC champ, right, that is coming to your place. Now, after that, they alternate the final 7 games home and away, right? So the last 7, you go home and away. There's no spot where you play back-to-back away or you play back-to-back home games. The final 5, you play at Pitt, you host Louisville, you play at Clemson, you host Wake, and you play at Georgia. Look, I think Pitt's going to be pretty good. I think Clemson is a question mark. We've already broken down Clemson on the podcast. There are some things to like there, but again, they've got to figure out if Chris Vicina or Tate Reynolds is going to be the quarterback. They had 9 players drafted. There's some holes there that Dabo Swinney's got to work through. They'll have them worked out, you would think, by November 14th. Wake Forest, November 21st, and then that Georgia game. So, the Louisville game is probably going to be on a Friday. The 2 games that we didn't talk about, they play at Virginia Tech and James Franklin on October 17th, and then they host BC on October 24th. So, if you kind of break it down where you play, okay, you got 4 or 5 at home to begin the year. Yes, there's 3 very challenging games there, maybe 4. And then you've got, your alternate home and away. The last 7, at least you're not playing any of those back-to-back on the road or anything crazy. I do think the beginning stretch and the end stretch are both pretty difficult. Look, any Georgia Tech fan that thinks that this team is going to go and win that many games again, 10 games again, I don't see it at this moment. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Georgia Tech can't be, a really good team again this year where they can go out and win 8 or 9 games again. I just don't think they're going to be in the hunt to win 10 like it looked like they might for a long time this past season where they ended up 9-4. Guys, listen, this is the You Think You Know Sports podcast. I appreciate you listening to today's episode on Georgia Tech. Louisville's up next. We're going to talk about the Cardinals on the next podcast. I hope that you will go follow me on TikTok and look at the link tree in my bio and find the other places that you can find my content. I'm also available at youthinkyouKnowSports.com, including a long blog on this Georgia Tech team as we get ready for college football season. Still over 100 days out. This podcast is being recorded on May 13th. We'll post updates if we need to on the Yellow Jacket. Thank you all for listening. Hope you'll catch the next podcast.